This program is brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service International Programs and Conservation Education, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Prince William County Public Schools, Monarchs in the Classroom, Project Learning Tree, and Partners in Resource Education.
Welcome to Monarch Live, a distance learning adventure. Bienvenidos a Monarcas en Vivo, una aventura de aprendizaje a distancia. My name is Margie Haynes, and I work for the United States Forest Service. I work with Canada and Mexico to strengthen sustainable forest management and biodiversity conservation. Students from across the United States and in Canada and Mexico are tuning in today for this electronic field trip, and we welcome you all. We are coming to you live right now from our studio in Prince William County, Virginia. And joining us outside today is Donna Clausen and students from Antietam Elementary School here in Prince William County, Virginia. Also with us in the studio are experts who will be joining us later in the program. During the next 60 minutes, you're going to see some cool places and meet some new friends on this virtual adventure. And you'll have a chance to ask the experts some questions. You may also join our game, so pay close attention because you can win prizes if you get the answer right. We'll explain more about the contest in just a minute. So, are you ready to begin our distance learning adventure? Let's get started. Today we're kicking off Monarch Live, and I hope that you will be able to join us throughout the school year as we migrate with monarchs that are on their way right now to the mountains of Mexico, and in the spring as they return from Mexico. First, I'd like to introduce Gail Kimball, who is Chief of the United States Forest Service. Chief Kimball, how did monarch butterflies catch your attention?
Thanks, Margie. Well, as a kid, I hiked in the woods with my family. We would always see birds and sometimes see frogs, rabbits, deer, and other animals, and sometimes we'd see butterflies. The thing I loved most about butterflies was that I didn't have to go far to find them. I could usually find plenty of butterflies right in my own backyard. I remember one butterfly in particular. It was big. It had these cool patterns of orange and black and white. I learned that it was called a monarch butterfly. Today I know that monarchs are one of our most amazing insects, and we should care about their conservation. We want you to know why this particular butterfly is so important and what you can do to protect it. We want you to know that you can find all sorts of cool things like butterflies in your own backyard. If you just take a few minutes and go outside, you can find all sorts of bugs and birds and maybe even some monarch butterflies. I'd like to introduce Dr. Sophia Saman, who is Director of Conservation for the United States Forest Service. She and the students are going to tell us exactly what we're going to learn today. Sophia?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Kimball. It's wonderful to be here with you today, celebrating and learning about monarch butterflies. It's important to get outside and experience the wonders of nature, whether in a national forest, grasslands, or wildlife refuge, even in a neighborhood park, or even in your own backyard and schoolyard. Nature is all around you. It's also very important to learn about nature and how the different parts work together. To be good caretakers of the natural world, you need information and skills to make a positive difference for monarch butterflies and every other part of nature. And you can learn about nature in your math class, or language arts class, or even your PE class. Projects like MonarchLIVE helps us learn about nature and give us tools to help conserve our natural resources. Today, I've got some students from Antietam Elementary School who are going to fill us in on what we are going to learn. I'll start with Katie.
We are going to learn about monarch biology, their life cycle, and their annual life cycle.
And we will learn about the importance of 3 countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, to the health of monarchs.
And we will learn about how we can preserve monarch habitat with gardens.
Thank you. And we will learn about some projects where students can study and contribute information about monarchs. Now, let's go. In just a moment, we will go outside to see Mrs. Clausen and other students from Antietam, and they can tell you about the game.
Thank you. As you might know, monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed. In our classroom, we did an activity to measure how much milkweed a monarch caterpillar would eat in 24 hours. Here's a picture of Crunchy Munchy, who was the subject of our experiment. We put Crunchy Munchy on a milkweed leaf like this when he was a caterpillar. We measured the amount that he ate, and we put it on centimeter graph paper so we could figure out just how much he would eat in one day. Now, Crunchy Munchy was a 5th instar caterpillar, the ones that eat a lot, when we did our experiment. The leaf that we used started off at 120 square centimeters. That was a big leaf. And we put him in the container for 24 hours and then took that big leaf out to see how much he'd eaten. Now, you're going to have a job. You're going to estimate how much of that 120 square centimeters of milkweed that Crunchy Munchy ate in one day. The first 5 schools who will send in the correct answer are going to win a prize. Now, we're going to give you the email address a little bit later before the question and answer time. So be sure you keep watching the program. You're going to get some more information to help you make a really good estimate, not just a guess. Our students are going to tell you how they conducted our experiment in the classroom. So back to you, Margie.
Thank you, Mrs. Clausen. I hope you'll think about this question and email your answer later on in the program. But first, I'd like to get back to you, Chief Kimball, and ask another question. Why should we care about monarch butterflies? What is so important about monarch butterflies anyway?
Well, for one thing, the monarch butterfly is beautiful. Can you imagine a world where all the beautiful things we can find outdoors, like butterflies, birds, and flowers, might be gone? Sadly, that can happen. Some animals and plants have become extinct, meaning they have all disappeared. Sometimes animals and plants become extinct because nobody cares enough to save them or their habitats. It could happen to the monarch butterfly. All life is connected in a web. Living things depend on other living things and on water and soil and sunshine. When one animal or plant disappears, something else that depends on it might be in trouble, and the web of life might be weakened. It eventually can affect the quality of life for all beings, including people. Everything is connected to everything else, and we want to make sure that plants and animals stay healthy in their natural areas. That includes the monarch butterfly. And now you're going to see how it fits into the web of life.
Thank you. This gives us all something to think about as we begin our journey. Okay, as I mentioned, MonarchLIVE is going to follow the migration of monarch butterflies to Mexico. Here's a map to show you where we are in the United States. We're in the state of Virginia. We also have maps from Journey North, which shows where the monarchs have been spending the night. It's also called their overnight roosting spots. Let's take a look at the map. The map starts with data that was entered August 29th and continues through October 2nd. As you can see, they're slowly but surely making their way to Mexico. If you'd like to see more maps like this, go to the Journey North website at the web address that's listed on your screen. Monarchs have a remarkable life cycle and migration cycle, and here to tell you all about it is Dr. Karen Oberhauser from the University of Minnesota's Monarch Lab. She studied monarchs for many years.
Thanks, Margie. I'm here with students from Antietam School in Prince William County, and these students have become expert monarch scientists this fall as they've raised and released several monarch butterflies in their classes. I'm sure that many of you watching this broadcast have done the same. We're going to review the life cycle that the students have observed and talk about their annual life cycle that takes several generations of breeding, migrating, overwintering, and then migrating again. We have examples of every stage of the individual life cycle here, from the butterflies to the caterpillars and the eggs and the pupae. So we're going to start at the very beginning, and we'll start with Corbin. What's the stage that comes first, Corbin?
The first stage of the monarch butterfly is the egg.
Okay, really good. And so we have some eggs in here, and we can look really closely at these eggs. And can you tell me what you notice about these eggs, Tim?
I noticed that they are very small and some of them already hatched.
Okay, a few of them hatched. Great. Now this might be a little difficult for our audience to see, so we have a bigger picture of an egg right here. Monarch eggs, like Tim said, are very small, so females can lay lots of them, sometimes over 1,000 if the females are kept in a cage where no predators can get to them and they have plenty to eat. The egg stage lasts about 4 to 6 days. So we'll move down to Miriam here now. And what's the next stage that comes after the egg stage, Miriam?
The egg hatches and then there's a larva or a caterpillar.
Okay, very good. You know both of the names for that, the larva or the caterpillar. So we have some little tiny larvae in here right now. And it's actually pretty hard to see these. But we have a picture right now of this. So this is the larva or the caterpillar that just hatched out of the egg. And does this look a little different to you, Tim, from a normal monarch that you've seen before?
Yes, it does. Because the real one is much smaller than it shows on the picture.
Right, a real one is a lot smaller. And what happens? How do they change when they get a little bit bigger?
They change by getting stripes by eating the milkweed.
Right, really good. So Tim knows that the caterpillars, once they start eating the milkweed leaves, get the pigment from the milkweed leaves that give them the typical black and white stripes. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the bigger caterpillars here, and I'm going to take one of these out and see if it can behave for me. Now, we can't tell if this is a boy or a girl yet, but we'll just hold this on. So here's a larger caterpillar right here, and we'll just hold them right here for the rest of our conversation. So we can look at that and think, what is the most important job for the caterpillars, Corbin?
To eat and eat.
Yeah, and why do they eat and eat so much?
So then they can grow.
Right, so that's the big job. Sometimes I think of monarch caterpillars as eating machines. Over the course of 9 days to about 2 weeks, a monarch caterpillar can increase its body mass or its weight by 2,000 times. Now, the skin of monarchs and other insects is a little like our bones. In fact, it's called an exoskeleton, which means outside skeleton. While monarchs are growing, their skin can't grow as much as they do, so they need to shed this skin. So can you tell me what the name for this process is when they're shedding their skin, Tim?
The name of the process is molting, or an easier word for it is shedding its skin.
Okay, very good. Molting or shedding their skin. So here's actually a close-up picture of a monarch caterpillar that shed its skin. And what we can see in this picture is that the old skin on the head is ready to fall off. So after the skin on the head falls off, so this little piece right here comes off, the caterpillar sheds the rest of its skin, sort of like you guys would take off one of your socks. But then it does something that with that skin that you would never do with a sock. Does anyone know what it does next?
It eats its old skin.
Right, so here we have a picture of a caterpillar that has just shed its skin. We can see the old skin right here, and it's going to turn around and eat that shed skin. Hopefully you never do that with your dirty socks. Okay, so the stages between the time that the monarch molts or shed its skin have a special name. Can you tell me what that name is, Tim?
It's called an instar.
Really good, yeah. The monarchs have instars that come in between the molts, and how many different instars do they have?
There's 5 instars.
Good.
The first, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth.
Okay, very good. So here we see each of the larval instars, and just to kind of, for comparison here, you can see the egg up on the top. So this 5th instar is the same stage as this one right here in the picture. Okay, so what's the name for the next stage, Corbin?
The chrysalis.
Right, the chrysalis. Do you know another name for the chrysalis stage?
Cocoon.
Actually, a cocoon is what moth the moth pupa is called a cocoon, and another name for either a cocoon or a chrysalis is called the pupa. Now, sometimes people call this stage a resting stage, but there's actually a lot going on inside the pupa. The monarch's wings are developing, and we can see the wings actually developing right here, and we can see them on the pupae that we have in the cage here. The wings are developing from tiny wing buds that were present in the larva, and the legs, mouth parts, and antennae develop from organs that have very different forms in the larva. This process of changing from an egg to a larva to a pupa and then to an adult is called complete metamorphosis. Insects with complete metamorphosis have a pupa that doesn't need to eat or move, at least very much. But I don't know if you all knew this, that most insect pupae can actually move a little bit while they're in the pupa stage. So all of these very complicated changes are taking place while the insect isn't moving around a lot or eating. And since they're pretty major changes, this is a good thing. And what's the last stage called? We can get to Tim here.
Butterfly.
Yep, and here we have a picture of the adult butterfly. And what are some of the really important differences between the caterpillars and the adults, Miriam?
The adult has wings, and then the caterpillar didn't have wings.
Right. And what do the wings allow it to do?
It allows it to fly.
Yep, it can fly and it can move a lot farther. And how about what it eats?
It can't really eat any. It can't eat any solid foods, but because it's proboscis, it can only drink liquids.
Excellent. Yep, it has a proboscis, so it can only drink liquids. And those liquids are called nectar. Now, we know that nectar is basically sugar water. That's all it is. Could any of you live if all you ate was sugar water, like all you drank was pop? No, no, you wouldn't be able to grow, and if you got sick, you wouldn't be able to heal. But as an adult, the monarch isn't growing anymore, and it's not repairing its old body tissues very much. All it needs is energy, and it can get that pretty well from nectar. So let's move on. What we've done now is we've talked about the life cycle of an individual monarch. It goes from an egg to a caterpillar to a pupa and to an adult. So let's now think about what's going to happen now next with monarchs. So Corbin, are you seeing many monarchs outside very much now?
No.
No, you're not seeing very many now. Are you seeing any in your gardens?
No.
No. You might be seeing there maybe are still a few left in Virginia, but I bet that you were seeing a lot more a couple weeks ago. Is that true, Tim?
Yes, because all of them are migrating to Mexico.
Right, so the monarchs are leaving. And the same is true for me. I was seeing a lot of butterflies in my garden a couple weeks ago. I live in Minnesota, which is about 1,000 miles west of here and a little bit north, and I haven't seen a monarch in my yard or at the University of Minnesota's butterfly garden for almost 3 weeks. So where are all of the monarchs now? Yeah, okay.
When it's winter here, they're all...
We need to get you the microphone here. Yeah.
When it's winter here, they're all going down to Mexico.
Right. And in a few minutes, we're going to learn about 2 citizen science programs that track monarchs during their migration. One of these programs is Monarch Watch, and I've just read several reports on the Monarch Watch website of lots of monarchs moving through Texas. Those monarchs came from Virginia, where all you guys live, and from Minnesota, where I live, and many other states and Canadian provinces, maybe even from your school garden or my campus garden. So we can look at these maps here. Here, maybe you could help me hold this map. Could you do that? Okay. So we have these maps here, and monarchs breed throughout the summer in the northern parts of their range. And right now, just put your hand right there to hold on to that. Really good. So right now, these monarchs are moving south, and where they are right now is in Texas, funneling through Texas and arriving at their overwintering spots in central Mexico, and if they're from the western part of the country, in coastal California. And they'll be getting there in late October and early November. Now, some monarchs in the eastern United States, maybe the monarchs that came from your garden in Virginia, may fly south into Florida and stay there and lay eggs in the winter. And a few of the western United States monarchs may fly into Mexico. But most eastern monarchs fly to Mexico, and most western monarchs fly to the coast of California. Now, as monarchs are migrating, traveling through all these places in the United States, they need access to plenty of flower nectar to give them energy for their flight, and also energy to keep them alive all winter. It's very important that we protect flowers and prairies and roadsides along their migratory path and plant gardens at our schools and homes to provide this nectar. In a few months, our MonarchLIVE program will follow the monarchs to Mexico, and we'll get to see their wintering spots high in the mountains. Just like we need to make sure that they have flowers as they migrate, we need to make sure that the forests that provide the right conditions for monarchs are protected. The very same monarchs that migrated down to Mexico fly back, and we can look right here. So here's the pathway, and you can help me hold that again. Here's the pathway of the monarchs flying back in the spring into the southeastern United States, maybe a few of them going down into Florida. But then do those very same monarchs, let's see, it's Tem's turn here, do those very same monarchs fly all the way back into Virginia and Minnesota where we are?
I think so.
Okay, well, some of them might get there, but actually most of the monarchs that are in the southeastern part of the United States lay eggs down here, and they just don't live long enough to fly all the way back into the northern part of their range. So it's actually the offspring or the children of the butterflies that flew from Virginia and Minnesota, went down to Mexico, came back here, and their offspring are the ones that come back to Virginia. And maybe you're right that a few of the ones might get all the way up here, but certainly none of the ones that overwintered get all the way to where I live in Minnesota. So then these butterflies have 2 more generations that don't migrate to Mexico and only live about 1 month. Now, for several decades, there was a scientist from Canada named Fred Urquhart, and his wife Nora led a tagging program to help answer the question of where monarchs from the United States and Canada went in the winter. School children, teachers, and other interested citizens put tiny stickers on the wings of monarchs like you guys. Didn't you guys do that? Yep, you all put tags on your monarchs. And by tracking the routes of the tagged monarchs that were found later, the Urquharts, helped by their associates in Mexico, finally found the wintering colonies. We'll hear more about Monarch Watch, the citizen science program that continues to use the tags to track the monarch migration, in a few minutes.
Wow, this is really fascinating, Karen. I've read that monarch migration is an endangered natural phenomenon. In other words, we just can't take it for granted that this wonderful migration will always be part of our world. It's possible that if we don't do something to help and increase awareness, this migration may not continue, or there could be a lot fewer monarchs. I'd like to ask Chief Kimball what we can do to be good conservationists and stewards. What is stewardship, Chief Kimball, and what can students and adults do to help butterflies?
There are things that can be done and things you can do to help protect monarchs. In fact, protecting monarch habitat is part of my job. As I mentioned, I work for the United States Forest Service, which actually means that I work for you. We work for the people of the United States, and our responsibility is to help take care of America's forests and to take care of America's grasslands too. That's called stewardship or conservation. So where do butterflies fit in? Forests are not just trees, and grasslands are not just grasses. Remember the web of life? Everything is connected to everything else in the web of life. Forests and grasslands and all the plants and animals that live in them and on them, plus the soils and the waters and the sunshine and the air that the plants and animals need to survive. All these things are tied together, and butterflies are part of that. A key responsibility of the Forest Service is to understand how everything is tied together in a forest or on a grassland. You just saw an example of that, the monarch butterfly. You learned where it lives and what it eats, the life stages it goes through, how and where it migrates each year, and what it does when it gets there. Now you are beginning to understand how the monarch butterfly works, how it fits together with all the things it depends on. Now comes the second part of our job as land stewards and as conservationists. Keeping the system healthy and working means protecting all the pieces of the puzzle and helping them fit together. The web of life can be very, very complex. All kinds of things might happen to remove one piece of the puzzle or to disturb one part of the web. When that happens, things can fall apart and the web must readjust. As stewards and conservationists, we must consider the whole web. Remember how monarch butterflies collect on trees in the mountains of central Mexico in winter? That's really cool. These trees are very important to the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, and it's important that there be enough of those trees and that those trees are healthy. Without them, a piece of the puzzle is missing. Landowners in the United States and Canada must consider the entire web of life when we make land use decisions, including the kinds of vegetation we keep and we manage. So as conservationists, we need to do what we can to protect the web. Protecting their habitat is part of protecting the butterflies. We've got Rachel Bayer here from Project Learning Tree to tell you about a special part of MonarchLIVE and about the butterfly gardens that you can build right in your own backyard. Rachel?
Thanks, Chief. I'm excited to be here from Project Learning Tree, and we're honored to be partners in the MonarchLIVE program. Project Learning Tree is the environmental education program of the American Forest Foundation, and we provide high-quality environmental education curriculum materials for teachers to use in their classrooms, and we believe that it is very important to get outside to learn. One way that we can do this is with gardens. Gardens are extremely important places for butterflies and other wildlife. In gardens, they can find the food, water, shelter, and places they need to raise their young. Project Learning Tree has a program called GreenWorks, and through GreenWorks, we provide grants to schools and other organizations for environmental service learning projects. And as part of MonarchLIVE, Project Learning Tree is pleased to provide special GreenWorks Butterfly Garden grants so that your class can receive up to $1,000 to create a butterfly garden at your school or somewhere in your community. So if you have ideas for how to improve your environment and provide habitat for monarchs and other butterflies and wildlife, then you and your class should definitely apply for a grant. So what do you need to do next? First, you need to come up with a project and make sure that you, the students, are involved in both planning and implementing it. The project must involve service learning, which means that what you're doing as part of the project is tied back to what you learn in class. Your teacher also needs to be trained in Project Learning Tree, and you need to involve a community group and be ready to have some fun. Some other items you should think about as you plan your butterfly garden are how will the garden be watered, especially in the summer when you and your teachers may not be around to water it. Where is the best location for your garden? Consider how much sun and shade an area gets before making your decision. What native plants can you use that will provide the best butterfly habitat? Here's an example of a garden that some students in Louisiana created. They are growing verbena, lantana, and butterfly weed and have attracted lots of butterflies, birds, and other animals. It takes some planning and work to create such a special place, but this school is really enjoying its outdoor classroom. You can find out more about the grants and get the application by going to greenworks.org. Make sure you get your proposals in by December 1st. Thanks, Chief.
So there are things we all can do to protect monarch butterflies, such as put in gardens, as Rachel mentioned. There are things you can do too, no matter how old you are and no matter where you live. I grew up in suburban Boston and spent time in the woods around the city and in the mountains. I learned early on how important forests are wherever they are. Forest soils catch water when it rains. Instead of quickly running off to the ocean, the rainwater goes into the forest soils and slowly comes out in our rivers and streams. From there, it comes into our homes and out of our faucets. Even though forests and water are very important, our most important resource is you. You are the next generation. You are the future of conservation, the future of our forests, of our water supplies, and yes, of monarch butterflies. That future depends on you. Take the time to go outside and have fun. Go for a hike. Watch a spider spin its web. Climb a tree. Splash around in a creek. Learn how to quietly observe wildlife. Learn about the plants and animals in your neighborhood. And while you do, while you're having fun outdoors, you'll learn about the outdoors without even trying. You'll learn about the things you see like monarch butterflies. You'll learn how important it is to protect monarch butterflies in every part of the web of life. The future of conservation is yours.
Thanks, Chief. That's very inspiring as well as challenging. But the more we know about monarchs and the entire web of life, the better job we can do to protect monarch habitats. Now I'd like to introduce Danita Cotter, who's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wildlife Refuge System. Ms. Cotter has been working with the Mexican and Canadian governments to help monarchs. She's also been working with students and adults who conduct research and participate in citizen science projects. A lot of people are very interested in monarch butterflies and spend a lot of their free time gathering information. Ms. Cotter, what is citizen science and how can students get involved?
Thank you, Margie. Citizen science is a partnership between volunteers and professional scientists. The volunteers work with scientists to gather information to help answer real questions about nature and the environment. Anyone who can make simple observations and keep organized and accurate records can be a citizen scientist. Age and experience don't matter at all. Citizen scientists can be anyone, including teachers and students just like you. Citizen scientists have been studying the monarch butterfly for over 50 years. Let's look at some citizen science projects studying the fall migration. Earlier in the program, Margie showed you some maps from Journey North. Journey North is an example of a citizen science program that studies migration and seasonal change. Using the internet, students in grades K through 12 share their field observations with classmates all across North America. In the fall, student volunteers report observations of overnight roost and count migrating monarchs. In the last 60 days, 644 monarch sightings have been reported from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. In the spring, volunteers report their first sightings of adult butterflies and first egg or larva. Journey North uses the information to produce online maps that illustrate the fall and spring migrations over time. Journey North citizen scientists are providing researchers with data on the location and timing of migration pathways and monarch habitat needs. All of the maps and records are stored permanently on the website, so scientists or anyone else who wants to can compare data from year to year. This helps us answer questions like, how do weather events affect monarch populations? And how will climate change affect breeding habitat and migration range? Monarch Watch is another citizen science program that uses tagging to gather information about the monarch butterfly. During the fall migration, volunteers capture, tag, and release monarch butterflies. The tags are tiny, round, lightweight stickers about the size of a hole punch or a pencil eraser. Don't worry, the tags don't hurt the butterfly or affect its ability to fly. Taggers have to keep a careful record of important data for each tagged monarch, like the capture location, release date, unique tag number, and gender of the butterfly. If a tagged monarch is recaptured later, we can analyze the route followed by the insect to answer questions about the migration. How fast do monarchs travel? How do wind conditions affect migration? From tagging, scientists have discovered that monarchs from certain locations in the U.S. and Canada are more successful in reaching the Mexican wintering grounds. Let's meet Larry Brinza, a citizen scientist here in Virginia who has been tagging monarchs for over 10 years in the Eastern Shore, Chincoteague, and Occoquan National Wildlife Refuges.
The ones in the back tail. The first tagged monarch that I had was in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I was tagging monarchs in 1996 for the first time. The following spring, I got a letter from the University of Kansas Monarch Watch program, and it said that someone in Luray, Virginia found a monarch that I had tagged. And to me, that was like winning the lottery. I knew that the recovery rate for monarchs anywhere, even though the distance was only 50 miles, was very unusual. Then, of course, the first time that I had a monarch recovered from Mexico, wow, that's about 1,900 miles as the crow flies from northern Virginia. And since then, I've had 13 recoveries from Mexico from the northern Virginia area.
As you are learning, across North America there are many millions of monarch butterflies and many places to find them. So scientists and land managers like the Fish and Wildlife Service and Forest Service need help building the scientific database and mapping out where monarchs breed and migrate. You can study monarchs in your own backyard or schoolyard, or on a nearby national wildlife refuge or national forest, joining folks across North America in a variety of citizen science projects that contribute to scientific conservation and research on the monarch butterfly. You can find out more about citizen science projects at the MonarchLIVE website.
Thank you, Ms. Cotter. While these citizen scientists are gathering data, it also looks like they're having a lot of fun. Now let's go back out to the courtyard where Mrs. Clausen and Antietam students are going to show us how they conducted their research called Munching with the Caterpillars. This will give you the last bit of information that you need before you send in your answer to the game.
Thank you. We conducted some research in our classroom and we had monarch caterpillars munching on milkweed all over the place. And we always gave them big leaves when they were 5th instar monarchs. And they ate a large amount of milkweed on some days and a small amount on others. For instance, one day, one of them only ate 31 square centimeters of the milkweed leaf. And on another day, one of them was really hungry and ate 143 square centimeters of milkweed leaf. So this will help give you a little bit of information about how to make your estimate of how much Crunchy Munchy ate in his one day. But now the boys and girls are going to tell you how they conducted their research, because scientists always start with a question. They want to know something, and we wanted to know how much would it eat in a day. So Howie, will you tell us what our question was?
How many square centimeters of a milkweed can a monarch caterpillar eat?
So we wanted to know that, and scientists always then come up with a guess or an estimate of what they think the answer will be. We call that a hypothesis, and we make that hypothesis before we actually do our experiment. So Adam is going to tell us what our hypothesis was for this experiment.
If you give a 5th instar monarch caterpillar a large milkweed leaf to eat, it will eat half of it in one day.
So we thought it might eat about half of the leaf. Some days we were right and some days we were wrong. We had to gather some materials to do our experiment, and Katie's going to tell you what materials we needed.
A large milkweed leaf, a 5th instar monarch caterpillar, a centimeter graph paper, a pencil, and a container for a caterpillar.
So you just need a few things to do this experiment. Now, what procedure did we follow? Elizabeth's going to tell you the procedure that we followed to do our experiment.
Trace the leaf onto graph paper. Put the leaf into the container with the caterpillar. Wait 1 day. Take out the leaf and give the caterpillar a new leaf. Trace what is left of the leaf. Count the numbers of square centimeters it ate.
So that's what we did to follow our experiment to see how much Crunchy Munchy ate, and you're going to be making your estimate of how much Crunchy Munchy ate. So back to you, Margie.
Thanks, Mrs. Clausen. Okay, we're going to take your questions now as well as accept answers to our game. The first 5 classes that send in the correct answer by email will win prizes. We won't be able to accept answers on the phone, so you may send in your answers now to the email address on the screen. We will also start taking your questions about monarchs, and the number to call is 800-578-1396. Jim Chu, who is also with the U.S. Forest Service, will be taking the email questions, and you can see some of the prizes that we have for the winning classes. Thanks, Jim. We'll get back to you in just a second. Okay, let's start with a question from one of our students here. Go ahead. What's your question?
Do all flies eat caterpillars?
Okay, that's a really good question, Tim. So you guys must have learned about parasitoid flies. Did you? Okay, so parasitoid fly females lay their eggs on a monarch caterpillar or another kind of caterpillar, and the maggot or the larva from the fly burrows through the skin, and the caterpillar or the larva eats the caterpillar from the inside. But there's actually just a small number of flies. Out of all of the flies that are in the world, only a small number of them are actually parasitoids. So usually if you see like a house fly in your house or other flies, they aren't parasitoids, but definitely some of them are. Good question, Tim.
Okay, let's take an email question. Jim, do you have one for us?
I sure do, Margie. We've got a question from Mrs. Corley's class of the Santori School in Galveston Island, Texas. We'd like to know how Hurricane Ike has impacted the migration of the monarch. Here on the island, lots of milkweed plants were destroyed by the salt water that flooded the island. Will this change their course?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. Hurricane Ike definitely had huge impacts along the coast of Texas. There are a couple things that suggest it won't have a big impact on monarchs, but clearly we have to wait until next year to find out. First of all, during the fall migration, a lot of the monarchs fly through the middle part of Texas. So those monarchs are not being affected too much by the hurricane that went through in the eastern part. Also, monarchs in the fall are migrating, so maybe our students in the studio can tell us, are those migrating monarchs really needing milkweed? No. What do they need so much when they're migrating? Nectar. Yes, they need nectar. So the fact that the milkweed is hurt in the fall won't have a big impact on the monarchs, but they will next spring, if the milkweed doesn't come back, then it could have an effect. So we'll have to wait and see how that salt water affects the milkweed.
That's a great question. How about another email question, Jim?
Sure. We've got a question from Kristen of Bangor Elementary School in Bangor, Wisconsin. How long have organizations been working together for this particular project?
Chief Kimball.
I think I could answer that. The Forest Service has been working in Mexico for over 20 years, working with the Mexican government on this whole issue of monarchs and where do monarchs overwinter. For over 10 years, we've been monitoring monarch butterfly use on the Medewan tallgrass prairie and the Hiawatha National Forests. And about 2 years ago, we completed, the Forest Service with a number of partners completed the Monarch Conservation Plan, and these partners have been working with MonarchLIVE for about the last year and a half.
Thank you. All right, how about another email?
Sure. This is from Marcy of the Blessed Sacrament School in Springfield, Illinois. How do butterflies get oil on their wings?
Actually, butterflies don't have a lot of oil on their wings. The butterfly wings are covered with a very special kind of thing. And can the students tell us what's on butterfly wings?
Meconium.
No, the scales. So the butterfly wings are covered with scales. And those scales provide some protection for the butterflies. They make them more aerodynamic as they're flying through the air. And they also keep the wings from drying out. So the scales function a little bit like oil because they keep the wings from drying out. But there isn't a lot of oil on the wings of butterflies. The body of butterflies, at least a young butterfly, has a lot of fat in it. So sometimes if the butterfly dies or if the butterfly desiccates for some reason, sometimes that oil will come out of the body. But the wings themselves don't have a lot of oil in them.
All right. I think we've got someone on the line. Sarah in Aberdeen, Maryland. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to know, last year I was at the Delaware Beach and noticed in the fall many monarch butterflies that were dead on the beach. Can you explain why that might have happened?
Yes, often we see butterflies, when butterflies are moving south, and I'm not sure exactly where you were in Delaware when you made this observation, but sometimes as the butterflies are moving south and they move on to peninsulas, it's almost like a dead end for them. So the butterflies move down into a peninsula, they want to keep moving south, and they just run into water. In some cases, those butterflies might actually start flying over the water. They might get caught in a storm or something that would kill them, and then they'd wash back onto the shore. In some cases, they might be flying along the shore, and a storm comes up. So usually when you see butterflies along a shore, and it's not that uncommon to see that, it's because the butterflies have been stuck when they're flying over the water.
Good question. How about another email, Jim?
Sure. I've got a teacher from Chicago, Illinois who wants to know that the teachers need to be trained in Project Learning Tree before they can apply for a grant. Can you tell us how to receive this training?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, during my little talk earlier, teachers do have to receive training in Project Learning Tree, and that means that they go to a professional development workshop. So they go to school for a day, and they learn how to use all of our curriculum materials so that they can take you guys outside to learn. And there's workshops happen all across the country. As well as in Mexico and in Canada. So you can find out where there are workshops in your area by going to plt.org, and from there you can contact your state coordinator and they can let you know when there is a workshop coming up in your area.
Good to know. Another email question?
We have a question from Sharon from Eisenhower Elementary School in Southfield, Michigan. She wants to know, do male butterflies lay eggs as well as female butterflies?
I bet our students know the answer to that one.
No.
No. Male butterflies can't lay eggs. Males of most species can't have offspring. The males need to mate with the females before the females can lay eggs, but that's really their only role. So male butterflies mate with the female and they never have any contact with their offspring after that. Actually, the females don't have much contact with their offspring either. The females lay their egg and then they never see the caterpillars, but they're very careful to put the egg in exactly the right spot so the egg, when the caterpillar hatches, it can do what? What can it eat? It can eat, and it's on the right food for it. It's on a milkweed plant. So that's the only care, the only parental care that caterpillars get.
How about another email?
We have a question from Misty from Ashland, Missouri. She wants to know, what is the average lifespan of a monarch butterfly?
Well, that's a really great question, Misty. And the answer to that question is it depends. Monarchs that don't migrate, so the monarchs that live in the summertime and don't get to migrate, live as an adult about 1 month. The monarchs that do migrate, so the ones that leave Virginia or Minnesota or wherever they start from, and then migrate down to Mexico and then come partway back, live 8 or 9 months. So the answer to that question is it depends on what generation. The migratory generations, 8 or 9 months. The non-migratory generations, about 1 month.
All right, I think we've got a question right here. Go ahead.
If monarchs are born in Florida, will they just stay in Florida or travel to Mexico?
Well, that is one of my favorite kinds of questions. And the reason that I like questions like that so much is that my answer to that question is I don't know. And I know a lot of the things that there are to be known about monarchs, so that means that you just asked the favorite kind of question for a scientist, because for a scientist, the best kind of question is one that we don't know the answer to, because that means that we could do research on it. So it's possible that some of the monarchs that go into Florida and might stay there for the winter time, their offspring might come back and maybe end up in Virginia in your garden. It's also possible that they stay down there. So we need to do some more research to figure out the answer to that question. And I think it's a really interesting question about monarchs. So maybe that's something you could answer one day.
All right, we've got a call from Colorado Springs. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, we're from Midland IB Elementary School in Colorado Springs, and we have a kindergarten, second grade watching. They would like to know how the monarchs get the different colors on their wings.
Okay, so how the monarch wings get their colors. That is a really interesting question. And with monarch butterflies, all of the coloration in the wings comes from pigment. So pigment is just kind of exactly the kind of thing that gives us our hair color or our skin color. We have pigment in our bodies that gives the color to us. And if you look closely at a butterfly's wing, each individual scale has its own color. So the wing colors come from pigments in the scales. There are some species of butterflies, not monarchs so much, but other species where the wings actually look a different color depending on how the light is reflecting on them. And that kind of color is what we call structural color. So that color is determined by the angle that the light hits the wing. But monarch wings are colored by pigment.
Another good question. We've got another call from York, Pennsylvania. Please go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering how you can tell the male butterflies apart from the female butterflies.
Okay, great question. I bet some of our students might be able to help us with that one. Here, do we have an answer right there? Yeah. Miriam has an answer to that.
There are little black dots on the male's wings when he opens them, and the female.
Yep, that's right. And a female doesn't have those spots on the wings. So actually it would be, I'm going to just turn around and look at this butterfly right here behind me. And right here, if this were a male butterfly, right here there would be, actually right here, we can see it on this male. This male has some spots on the wings, just like Miriam just told us about, and that means that it's a male. These are specialized scales that produce a scent that the females can detect. There are also other differences. The male butterflies have slightly narrower wing veins, so here's a very narrow wing vein on the male butterfly. The female butterfly has slightly wider wing veins, and the males are a little bit brighter.
Thanks everyone for your great questions. Now let's go back out to the courtyard and let the students tell you what the answer is to our game. Let's see how much milkweed Munchy Crunchy munched.
Well, after a day of Crunchy Munchy eating his milkweed leaf, we measured how much he ate, and Derek is going to reveal the answer to you.
Crunchy Munchy ate 81 centimeter squares of the leaf.
That's a lot of milkweed to eat in one day. And now Archie's going to tell you what we learned, our conclusion of our scientific process and our experiment. What did we learn then?
You need to give 5th instar monarch caterpillars large leaves every day because they eat a lot.
They certainly do eat a lot. They can eat all the way up to probably even more than 143 square centimeters in a day. So those 5th instar caterpillars are still growing. They need to take in a lot of nourishment from their milkweed. So we need lots of milkweed in the world. Back to you, Margie.
Thanks, Mrs. Clausen and students. Munchy Crunchy sure was hungry. Jim, can you tell us who won these great prizes?
We're still trying to figure that out right now. We're still going through the email, so we'll let you know later on in the show, or possibly during the webcast.
All right, that sounds good. Certainly are some lucky students out there, and you'll be able to look for those prizes in the mail. That's all the time we've got right now for questions, but if you're watching the webcast on the internet, stay with us after the end of our program, and we'll be able to answer more of your questions. Okay, as I mentioned, Monarch Live is going to continue migrating with the monarchs, and Dr. Sanan is going to tell us where Monarch Live is going to go from here.
We hope you will be joining us for all of our programs during the school year. We are especially excited about going to Mexico in February. On February 17, we will be the first to broadcast live from the mountains of Mexico, where the monarchs overwinter in the Oyamel forests. On February 19, we will be at a community center where Mexicans will talk about what they are doing to protect these forests. In May, we will join an inner city organization in Chicago, which is seeing big results for a little space that have turned into a butterfly garden. That same week, we will stop by MonarchLIVE in Minnesota to learn about monarchs, summer behavior, and population growth, people who are in monitoring monarchs, as well as threats to monarchs. Lastly, we will have a web chat from Point Billy in Canada at the end of May. Right now, we've got a special guest on the line from Mexico. Laura Mosi is a 13-year-old student living in Mexico. Hello, Laura. Are you there?
Yes, hello.
We see from the Journey North maps that the monarchs are making their way to Mexico. When do they arrive, Laura?
They start arriving at the end of October, and the immigration is complete around the 15th of November.
Laura, do you do anything special during their arrival? Is the arrival of monarch butterflies celebrated in any way?
In Agangueo takes place the Monarch Festival. There are many cultural events like concerts, art expositions, typical food, and street markets. These festivals take place all the time that the monarchs are here.
Laura, I understand that butterflies are popular in Mexican art and throughout history. Are butterflies part of your culture?
Butterflies have been object of study, veneration, and respect through history in Mexico. In many archaeology places, we can see representations of them. Some butterflies were associated with beauty and love, and others with bad news. We also have rivers and mountains named after them in pre-Hispanic languages, like Papaloapan, which means river of butterflies, and Papalotepec, which means butterfly hill. Because of the time of the year when they arrive, monarch butterflies have been associated with the Day of the Dead, 2nd of November. Local people used to say that monarch butterflies were the soul of their ancestors coming to visit them. They are also associated with the harvest.
Can you describe what's like in the forests where they cluster?
Here in Mexico, they cluster in Oyamel Forest. These places are usually protected from strong winds. The temperature is low, but it never gets extremely cold. When the temperature rises at the beginning of the spring, monarch butterflies start mating and move to places where they can find water.
Thank you, Laura. And MonarchLIVE looks forward to being in Mexico.
I hope you continue with us and the monarchs on their way to Mexico. If you're in the southern United States, the monarchs are still traveling through. Watch for them and post your information on Journey North. Remember, you can apply for a garden grant, as Rachel mentioned. The deadline is December 1st, so you'll be ready to start your gardens in the spring when the butterflies return. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their support, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in and participating. Go to the website and continue to participate in MonarchLIVE. Gracias por su participación. Visite la página web y siga participando en Monarcas en Vivo. For those of you watching the webcast, stay with us right after this program, and we'll be answering questions for another 15 minutes. Now let's go outside. Mrs. Clausen and her class have a special activity to close the program.
Move your hand up.
Here's Crunchy Munchy, and he is a gorgeous monarch butterfly. He's here along with two of his friends who emerged at the same time, and we're going to release them now so they can begin their migration to Mexico. They're anxious to get away, so watch closely. This is Crunchy Munchy. He has a tag on him, LGY017, and we hope when this program goes to Mexico, they might run into him down there. So boys and girls, let's let them go.
Bye. 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 Oh, can I wash my hands?
Okay, just keep waiting.
Stay here, stay here, stay here.
Yes,
Shh, we're on camera. Now you can sing. It's over.
Fly, fly, fly. I'm gonna fly, fly, fly down to Mexico. When I was a caterpillar, just a little bitty caterpillar, just a chewing on a milkweed stem. You know I couldn't fly back then, but I began a metamorphosis. First I wrapped myself inside my chrysalis. I grew and I changed inside. Then I turned into a monarch butterfly before it gets cold and it starts to snow. Snow, snow, snow. Well, I'm gonna go, yes, I'm gonna go down to Mexico. Well, I'm gonna fly, 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 fly. I'm gonna fly.